Welcome to the World of Warcraft Legion Design Retrospective panel.
Hi guys. Welcome, heroes of Azeroth, to the World of Warcraft Legion Design Retrospective. This is really our opportunity to talk to you guys about some of the very early iterations of design in World of Warcraft Legion, to show you some screenshots of things that never even made it to the alpha, talk a little bit about really what we do for a living, how we iterated, how we redesigned things, and then even in some cases, talk a little bit about where we want to go into the future. I'm going to kick things off. My name is Jeremy Fiesel. And I'm going to be talking about probably the very first thing that you did in WoW Legion, and that was the Broken Shore experience. So let me paint a picture for you here of a team, can you imagine, that was very early on in Legion design. At this point, we had only begun concepting a single zone, and that was Azuna. Beautiful shot you can see of here. And we loved this art style, this sense of history in this place. There's so much that's gone on the Broken Isles, so many stories that we wanted to tell of the ancient elves that used to live there, what happened to them, the sinking of the continent and it rising again. So it was at this point that we begun our first concepting of the Broken Shore. Given that we really liked this art aesthetic, and that the Broken Shore is connected to Suramar via a land bridge, we figured, why don't we go ahead and continue this ecology into the Broken Shore? Here's a very early screenshot of what the Broken Shore looked like. As you can see, it's very different than what ended up in the shipping product. There's a lot of coral there. There are ancient elven ruins that were very pretty, and at one time, you could tell were pristine and beautiful. And we went a little bit further down the Warcraft 3 direction. If you played the Broken Shore experience in the Tomb of Sargeras, way back in the Frozen Throne, there was a lot of really pretty undersea life there. So we applied that to our Broken Shore as well. We thought it looked pretty cool. We decided to move forward. We applied color. We added demons and the Fellstorm. And this was the end product. So as you can probably tell, there's significantly less demon influence here. And the Tomb of Sargeras at this time was still a pristine entity. The demons had really only begun to invade our shores. So we did our first playtest. As you can see, we like to stand things up very early. A lot of the art assets weren't complete. But we wanted to see how long it would take, how it paced, and whether or not we were telling the story that we really wanted to tell to kick off the Legion expansion. In the first playtest, there were a couple of things that you never saw in the shipping product. In one section, there was a giant pillar, and you jumped in gnomish gyrocopters to blow it up. Past that pillar was a pristine city section that looked completely different than everything else on the Broken Shore. It looked like it had been untouched for centuries, like it was something that the Highborn would still exist at. And in this pristine city section, with trees, with grown elven buildings and elven architecture, there was Tyrande, standing in the center amongst a circle of dead sentinels. Surrounding her were the ghosts of the ancient elven priestesses that used to worship with her at this temple. Now, of course, Tyrande being evil, she was being mind-controlled, because that's what Dreadlords do. So you damaged her down to 30%, and she called out to the Mother Moon to dispel this horrid illusion that had caused her to lose her sanity. That shattered the illusion for everyone in the area, and the buildings crumbled, and the trees withered, and the coral returned. And you learned that this was Tichondrius and his brothers. You then completed what we call a bar objective, where you do a variety of different things. In this case, it was putting down some elven spirits, killing some dreadlords, and rescuing some elven sentinels, and you worked your way through the rest of the area. There was also a significant increased amount of path crossings for the Alliance and the Horde. We thought it was a pretty cool idea that we had a scenario that had both the Alliance and the Horde in it, and we thought it would be pretty great if you were able to see the other side. We went a little bit crazy with this idea, and at one point, the Alliance was going over a bridge, and the Horde was going under you, and you were jumping over the Horde and waving at them, and it was a little silly, but we thought it was pretty cool. Ultimately, the entire thing took 2 or even 3 or more hours, significantly longer than the shipping Broken Shore experience. So we did our first playtest, and we came out of it feeling like we weren't telling the story that we wanted to be telling. So what went wrong? Well, we looked at the story that we were telling, especially with our architecture and level design. A pristine elven tomb off in the distance that was once a worshiping place for elven priestesses. It was surrounded by a city that was once pristine, but was now in ruins. And it was also underwater at one point. And it also had elven ghosts at one point. And if you look at this list of things, of the story that we were telling in this space, you're probably saying, wow, there's something missing. And it's literally the title of the expansion pack, The Legion. We weren't focusing on what was cool about the Burning Legion returning to our world. So what story should we be telling instead of this one? The Legion is here. And not only is the Legion here, they have brought new toys, which to destroy us with. They've brought new structures. They have new mechanisms to invade our world and destroy our major lore characters. Sorry about that. So we sent this back to our artists, and we said, let's think about the Legion more like a Warcraft 3 army. How would they bring in their structures? What would their units be? What would their defensive structures be? And they came back to us with this concept. A Legion command citadel shooting out a fell seed into our world, out of which structures grew out of the ground and poured out demons, built up defensive structures that destroyed us and pushed us back. And this, we really felt like was a new version of the Legion that we've never seen before. A version of the Legion that was scary enough that they could kill off some of our major characters. So we sent this back to the artists again and said, okay, but this needs to feel like the ultimate expression of power for the Legion. This is the Legion's seat of power on the Broken Isles. Take this idea of these structures and these units and tell us, what would that look like? And they came back to us with this, a fell city. And we all kind of looked at this and said, yeah, that's what I want to see when I crest that hill in the Broken Shore. I want to see our future go up in flames because the Legion is able to take over a space this rapidly in a way that they've never done before and destroy major lore heroes like Tyrion. From there, it was all downhill. We loved the art style and we applied it to the rest of the Broken Shore, all the way up to the beginning, and including the once pristine Tomb of Sargeras that you can see here that is completely felled out. We're happy that you're going to be able to return to this space, which we think the artists did an awesome job on, in patch 7.2, and even experience both the dungeon and the raid of the Tomb of Sargeras. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to a man who headed up the other half of the introductory experience for Legion, Mr. Blingtron himself, Jonathan LeCraft.
Some time ago, the team got together and we picked out the features for the next expansion. Things like dungeons and raids and quests, and even the Demon Hunter as a new class. Well, as it turns out, that was way back in Burning Crusade. So when we got a second chance with Legion, we didn't waste a minute. In fact, I want to say within about 3 days, we had an internal build where you could make a Demon Hunter, hop in through the regular character creation process, had a few abilities, and you even kind of looked the part. And what this allowed us to do was start a really cool feedback loop where people could easily play, and then they would come and talk to us, and we'd be able to make changes, and we'd repeat that. Well, after a few weeks, we took a deep breath and we said, let's look at some of our core philosophies. Well, with Legion, every character class had a laser focus on its core fantasy and some reinforcement there. So that one was easy to put front and center. But we also knew a lot of people were going to try out the Demon Hunter, so we wanted also to make sure that it was easy to learn. And one of the ways we kept ourselves on track for that was we've said, all right, let's limit the number of abilities we're creating to a single bar, meaning no more than 12. And how we went about that is we made this map. And this is a bunch of high-level concepts in very discrete quantities. And this really helped keep us on path when we were surrounded basically by too many cool ideas. So there's the plan. And I also wanted, so there's the high-level plan. Let me talk about some of the individual abilities and the design iteration there, starting with I-beam. Well, this one started out simple enough. We had a brainstorm, and we were talking about the Illidan fight, and someone says eye lasers. And at the time, I remember looking around at everyone, and we all thought, well, this is kind of ridiculous, but we also all thought, of course we have to do it. So the first iteration, the first prototype was very simple. It was beam from your eyes to the target, did some damage around them. Okay. Well, we kicked that up a little bit, and instead you would hover in the air, and you would channel this beam into the ground. But wherever your mouse cursor went, that beam would follow it and do damage to everything around it. And this actually felt kind of cool and a little bit different, but for one problem was that most mobs don't move around that much. So a lot of times you'd just be sitting there, hovering in one spot, and it didn't feel very heroic. Well, next up, we got this awesome storyboard from the artist. And we looked at that and we said, oh, we love it, let's do it. And we implemented it, and we hopped in the game, and we tried it out, and we loved it. But as we played it, we kind of said, oh, you know what? I think this ability is doing too much. In fact, it kind of feels like two abilities. Well, there we have an easy decision. We just cut it in half. And that first part, where all those arcing energy comes from your eyes and slams down around the opponent, that became the talent known as Fel Barrage. And that second half, with that powerful front-facing beam, gained some artistic embellishments and became the I-beam that you know today. Now, another ability with a humble beginning is Fel Rush. And this one began its journey as a simple charge to the target with a big chunk of damage at the end. And it was very functional, and in fact, it worked awesome with Vengeful Retreat, but we wanted something a little more unique. So what did we do? Well, first we took off the targeting, and that turned it into a short dash, which then, of course, damaged anything you would pass through. We also made it really, really fast. And just as a kicker, we thought, you know what? What if we let you Fel Rush over obstacles? So we gave it the ignore gravity effect. And we tried it out, and it felt really good, except for one tiny wrinkle. And that was, there you are in the starting area. You're cruising towards that first quest giver, and you're going down a very steep slope, and you hit Fel Rush, where you would stick to the ground for maybe a couple yards, but then you would lift off and get launched into the air, right off the edge to your death. We didn't want that. So the next day, I went to talk to one of the programmers. We'll call him Steven. That's his actual name. And I said, Steven, how do we make it so that you stick to the terrain but go over obstacles? And that's kind of an ambiguous request. So at some point during this conversation, he stops me. And he opens up a drawer, kind of ominous. But he pulls out a little monitor and a console. He plugs it in, and he turns it on. And there's Mega Man. And this is one of the earlier 2D versions. And in that game, they've got a jump and they've got a dash. And what we were able to quickly discover is they had solved it by giving all the control to the player. Meaning, if you're on the ground, you stick to the ground. If you're in the air, then you do the air dash. So in that one little move, we were able to gain some really great design inspiration from one of our favorite games of all time. Of course, we have to talk about the big purple demon in the room, Metamorphosis. This one threw us for a little bit of a loop because even from the get-go, we saw the early art and we said, oh, it's going to be so epic. The form is going to sell itself. We don't need to do very much. Let's just add a nice, straightforward damage bonus. But the feedback, in fact, from you guys, was, well, I can't really feel the effects of it. Huh. That should be an easy problem to solve, so we just doubled it. But lo and behold, same feedback. At this point, we kind of suspected something was wrong, but you know what? We doubled it again. And at this point, it's just completely ludicrous values. And the feedback changed only to, oh, well, I'm definitely killing things faster, but I'm not really sure why. And that's when it crystallized that any changes going forward had to be visceral. So we did 3 things. Well, first we added that big Illidan-style leap. You stun everything when you land. And then we added the haste bonus, which let you attack faster, which means you were pressing buttons faster, and that's something you can feel. And then last, we concentrated that damage bonus into 2 abilities so you could more easily see where it's coming from. Now, each of those have their own story, too. But I don't want to take up the whole hour. Come find me if you want to hear them, though. So I'm going to leave you guys with some stats. I like stats. 2 out of 3 Legion accounts have made a Demon Hunter for some purpose. We don't know. So we dug down a little bit more. And 30% of those Demon Hunters have made it to 110. So that's probably why you always see them in instances and running around. And if you've gone through the experience, you know there's a choice between Kain and Alterus. Spoilers. But Kain is winning, just so you know, by a long shot. Next time you see him in game, give him a high five. And last, my favorite, 7.5% of all Demon Hunter names, are a pun with Illidan. And we even looked into some of that and saw that they've been saved for a very long time. So as it turns out, you were prepared. You guys, thanks for letting me ramble. Right now, I want to give it up to the guru of artifacts and connoisseur of the Hawaiian shirt, Owen Langren.
We'll get there. So blank slate, an empty canvas, dreams. When we were beginning to work on artifact weapons, that's pretty much what we had. Thankfully, our artists are really, really good at turning dreams into images and concepts and reality. And so we quickly got to work solving some of the problems. Today I'm going to talk to you about the artifact powers. What really makes an artifact weapon an artifact weapon? I'm going to talk to you about the way that your artifact progresses and grows with you over time. But before I do that, I want to explore a little bit about the core values that we had for what the artifact was. We wanted this artifact to be the single most powerful thing your character had ever equipped. The item that you held in your hands and looked at and said, how is this possibly going to get stronger than it already is? We had examples from lore, things you'd seen in the past. Ashbringer, Doomhammer, even Frostborn. So we had these ideas of what an artifact weapon could be, but we still really didn't know what it would take to actually realize that. And to do that, we knew that we had to focus on concentrating the cool and really digging down into one particular weapon. We chose Ashbringer. We said, okay, we are going to build Ashbringer from the moment you start your acquisition quest to all of the powers that we can possibly get. We sat down and we started brainstorming, and the team was just bubbling with ideas. And there were so many cool ideas for powers and stuff that we knew that we couldn't just have one really powerful thing on that weapon. It needed to be a whole host of different ideas. We also knew that Ashbringer wasn't going to be something that a Death Knight was holding on to, that a warrior was wielding to smash in battle, that Ashbringer was going to be purely for retribution paladins. and then each of these artifacts would be tied uniquely, inextricably linked to your specialization, almost like a second character in a way. And so thinking about it like a second character, we said, okay, we have all of these cool powers that we've brainstormed, we have all of these cool ideas. How are we going to present them to the player?
They're giving them out.
And so what you see up here is a very early Visio. Like, we couldn't even put these in the game yet. We couldn't attach them all to an item. But we had an idea. We're saying, okay, we're gonna make 3 really cool splashy powers. We're gonna put them at the ends of these trees, and after you equip Ashbringer for the first time, you then are going to choose one of these trees and go down it, and eventually get that splashy power at the end. And so we prototyped this in game, and it worked pretty well. I mean, classic talent trees work pretty well themselves. But it had a core problem. As soon as you picked up Ashbringer, we were actually asking you to make a choice that drastically impacted the rest of your leveling experience and even some of your time at endgame. And so because of that, you ended up reading all of the traits and talents. Oh man, this is just completely nuts. So we went back to the drawing board, or in this case, Microsoft Excel, and we said, hey, we're going to try a completely different idea. Tiers of power, wherein you buy up all of tier 1 before you can unlock things in tier 2. Buy up all of tier 2 before you can unlock things in tier 3. We prototyped this in game, and you can see there that there was a bar on the side that indicated how powerful your artifact had become over time. So we'd solved the problem of forcing you to make a really intense choice, but we'd also solved the problem of choice altogether. You just got to buy what you could buy in tier 1, and that wasn't really fun at all. We then went onwards. Okay, let's hybridize these things. Give you so many powers within each tier that you can't possibly choose them all. Well, now you're wondering, should I go back to tier 1 or pick that new cool thing in tier 3? We tried an arc approach with really strict dependencies that you slowly moved clockwise around the artifact as Ashbringer was sitting there front and center. But that had sort of pendulumed back to that original 1.0 problem where we were asking you to make a really important choice immediately. And so none of these solutions are really working. But the arc had one core element that really inspired us: Ashbringer, front and center in that UI. And that led us to what we call the constellation. We took the best parts from all of those different solutions that we tried. The 3 splashy, unique gold-bordered traits. The idea that eventually you could get everything from the tiers of power. The idea that there were a whole bunch of things to get from our hybridized approach, and the strict dependencies of the arc layout that let us go and map across. So constellations, we think, solved a lot of the problems, and hopefully you're having fun with them today, but they took a lot of time and effort and iteration to get to. So we've got our powers, we know how to present them, but what does the artifact actually do when you pick it up for the first time? What does Ashbringer do when you get to wield it and bash those demons in the skull? Well, again, let's look back to history. Let's look back to the things in the past. Legendary weapons. We knew that legendary weapons were cool and exciting and really represented the pinnacle of power prior to that. And all of those legendary weapons had a very strong passive effect. Something that every time you were swinging, you had a chance to trigger this. And so we built that. We said, hey, Ashbringer is going to have an incredible power. It will vaporize demons every time you attack. And they delivered the combat power. It was very successful at making sure that you killed stuff a lot faster. But over and over, we got the feedback, even from you and Beta, that your character hadn't changed when you equipped your artifact weapon. You were pressing the same buttons in the same order. And that just wasn't acceptable for something that was supposed to be the core fantasy of what a weapon could be. So we went back to the drawing board and gave you active abilities instead. And immediately we knew that this was the right direction. The active abilities were a visceral moment where you made the choice. You invoked the power of Ashbringer, blasting demons into the ground. Further, they allowed us to differentiate much more so than the passive abilities that were triggering off spells, left, right, left, right. Here, Falkiel could suck the soul of your demons themselves and channel it into raw destructive energy. Alaneth could implant an arcane time bomb in the heart of your enemy. Tick, 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 boom. Finally, it gave us the ability to really amp the visuals up to 11. Because we knew that when you invoked the power of your artifact weapon, nothing else was happening. You'd made a conscious choice in that moment to say, okay, I'm going to use this power. And so you wouldn't be mortal striking, you wouldn't be death from aboving, you wouldn't be Templars verdicting, you would be invoking your artifact, and so we could crank the visuals up to 11, like Cinderghost's fury sweeping across the battlefield. So we have our power, we know what happens when we pick up the artifact for the first time and use it. How does the artifact actually grow and change with you? And again, we are thinking about these artifact weapons almost as characters. So what's the simplest possible solution for growing a character? Experience. So we literally mirrored experience values. You started out with a very small artifact that would get experiences. You did quests and killed kobolds and Vrykul and demons and everything else. And it worked pretty well. Item level increased, you got access to new powers, but it had a core problem in that you were very quickly diverging from your friends, and if someone played even 1 or 2 more hours than you 2 or 3 times a week, a couple weeks later you'd end up in a situation where you couldn't even play with each other, and that was really sad. So I said, okay, well, leveling solves this by caps, right? Leveling, you go to 110. So let's try that in this system. Let's install a cap in the amount of artifact experience that you can earn at that time. And it had worked for Valor in the past, and we heard your feedback in patch 6.2 that, this was perhaps not the most fun thing in the world, but we also solved the problem of actually wanting to play a lot of the time, because you had in your hands a weapon that you wanted to power up, but you couldn't anymore. And so when you were pushing for that Mythic +7 or Mythic +8, suddenly you had no incentive to do that. But that obviously wasn't acceptable either. Our next attempt was the thing that we know as artifact knowledge today. The idea that no matter when you play, no matter what you do, you can always empower your artifact. But that every day that passes as your researchers are looking into their books and scrolls and finding out what's going on, they're creating multipliers, making your ability to empower the weapon even better. So this makes sure that play is always valuable, but at the same time, it ensures that you can't ever diverge too far from your friends, because they're also learning how to empower their weapons better. And ultimately, that item that may have given you 1 bubble initially gives you 5 or 6 different power bubbles on the progression to a power. So those are some of the challenges that we faced when we were developing the game systems behind the artifacts. I hope you're looking forward to the challenges that you will be facing in patch 7.2 as you complete your solo challenges to get the last appearance for your weapons. With that, I'm going to hand things over to Brian Holinka, who's going to tell you why Red Paladins are totally fair and balanced in PvP, and the artifact trades from Ashbringer are, pretty good.
Thank you, Owen. I'm not even sure, do we even have Red Paladins here today? I'm not even sure. I'm not going to talk about Red Paladin PvP as much as you would all love that. Instead, I'm going to talk about the honor system that we added in Legion, kind of the problems we were trying to solve when we were designing it, and some of the challenges we had. When we sat down to make Legion, we said, what are our goals for PvP? What are we trying to do? Well, if we were trying to make it more cute, we'd just get a pink gnome and pigtails, because that's the cutest thing ever, right? But really, there are a lot of people who love PvP, because PvP is love. There's people playing. We just had the Arena Championships, had probably the biggest crowd we've ever had at BlizzCon for that. Incredible competitions. We have people who play this game for days to be the absolute best at their class, and we have a huge community that loves them. So there's a lot of people that love PvP. But it's always better when you have more people to kill, or your friends want to play with you as well. We want to bring more people into our PvP love circle. And what we saw is, there are people who've played World of Warcraft for over 10 years. Anybody play World of Warcraft for over 10 years here? And they've played this game forever. They write blogs about it. They run podcasts. These people, they're super into the game. But for whatever reason, they didn't play PvP. And for us, we always thought, well, some people just aren't competitive gamers. Some people just don't like player versus player. And then 2 things happened. Heroes of the Storm came out, and Overwatch came out. And all of a sudden, we saw these same people who love World of Warcraft playing in these other competitive games. So obviously, we read that one wrong. And we thought about it. We kind of reached out to all of you, and we said, well, what's the problem? What's the thing? And a lot of people said, you know, maybe gear is the problem. Because we've always kind of done things with gear to make it feel very unique and special for PvP players. But what that possibly did was put a wedge into the communities. It said, I'm either a PvPer or I'm a PvEer because that's the thing I'm pursuing. That's the gear I'm pursuing. Resilience will fix it. But that didn't necessarily happen. And so we thought, well, all right, if gear's the problem, maybe let's just try removing gear. Now, I don't mean naked PvP, as fun as that would be. I just mean that your gear doesn't increase your power. We set your stats, and we try to make things balanced from a PvP gameplay standpoint. And that works in a lot of ways. Obviously, anybody can enter PvP in this situation and feel like they're competitive. We have a lot of balance knobs that gives us. But at the same time, your gear is what defines your character. It's what you're doing in this role-playing game. You're going out, getting gear, and making yourself more powerful. So our next idea was, well, why don't we try what we did for Mists of Pandaria challenge mode dungeons? We'll say everybody's the same eye level. And that also, once again, kind of solves our balance problems. Everybody's the same power. Your gear has meaning and significance. But the problem here is you don't really have any pursuit of getting better gear. You don't care about eye level at all. I mean, imagine if we lived in a world where secondary stats trumped eye level. That would be a rough place. And so instead, we want people to want to, you know, not just get one set of gear, that trinkets bonuses and set bonuses are the only thing that matter, and then they never equip and upgrade. So that's when we came to our hybrid approach that we have now, which is kind of a system where we set your stats, but then we also increase those stats based on your average item level. And this is great because, once again, for the most part, in the back of your head, you know that gear matters. Like, you want to go out and get better gear. But on the other hand, you don't think it matters that much. And so this gives us the ability to tune the game in cool ways, and players still feel like getting gear. But it's always been the case in PvP that gear was your progression system. You'd go into random battlegrounds, earn honor, about 27,000 of it, and you'd get your full PvP set, honor set. Then you'd go into rated arenas or rated battlegrounds, earn conquest, about 27,000 of it, and then you'd have your full gladiator set. And now we're kind of reducing the impact of gear, so that progression didn't feel as worthwhile. So we thought, let's revisit what honor is, and basically arrived at Honor 3.0. Honor as a secondary leveling system in the game. So whenever somebody does a battleground or does an arena, they're earning honor and moving this bar from left to right, because who doesn't love to move a bar in World of Warcraft, right? And so you're moving this bar from left to right, and you're upgrading, you're getting that ding effect, you know, boom. And so that's great. But at the same time, a bar is just not enough. You need to come up with cool and compelling rewards at every level that make you excited to ding. And we thought, well, this is a really cool opportunity for us to create all those spells that we think make a lot of sense for PvP, but don't make a lot of sense for the rest of the game. And that's where we created our honor talent system. But we had a problem with our honor talent system. Should we unlock honor talents just like we do normal talents? You get a row, you go completely across when you hit a level from left to right. In that case, you would have to reach max level to have an option in every row. And that seemed like a problem to us, because ultimately we were trying to solve that problem already with gear. So instead, we said, well, what if you unlock talents one at a time going down the column? And what this allowed us to do is by level 10, you have an option in every one of those rows. Maybe it's not the best option for every situation, but you're effectively at full power. And that's 20% of the way, because you honor from level 1 to level 50, so by level 10, you can get there pretty quick. But then as you unlock more honor talents, it's about customization options. It's about, hey, when I'm in a battleground, this one makes sense. When I'm in an arena, this one makes sense, or when I'm out in the world. And so that's great. We love this system. We've gotten great feedback. Players enjoy this, and they love their cool honor talents. But in the same respect, that's something maybe a PvPer is the only one who'd care about. If you don't actively go in PvP, this spell that only works in PvP is not as compelling. So we went out and tried to come up with some really cool faction-specific toys, like our honorable pennants, so you can show off Horde versus Alliance. Incredible mounts that our artists make that are unique to the honor system. And of course, unique artifact looks that have a very PvP vibe to them. And fortunately, as we go, we can continue to create new rewards for the honor system moving into future patches. Perhaps like these two little guys making a comeback. We didn't really just want it to be about going from 1 to 50, though. If you unlocked all of your honor talents at 50 and you did that in the first 2 weeks of the expansion, how are we going to continue this progression in any meaningful way? So we took inspiration from some other games, and we thought, you know what would be cool? What if you could optionally repeat that progression for cosmetic rewards? Things like the artifact look or a badge on your unit frame. It won't be a thing you are required to do, but something we wanted to be hardcore. So we said, well, when you do it, you reset your level to honor level 1, and all of your honor talents go away. And this was controversial for a number of reasons. But for us, what really swung the pendulum was we created all these cool rewards for the honor system, mounts and artifact power and gold and cool toys and pets. And now most people weren't going to do it because this barrier was so significant. So then in 7.1, we just did a 180, said you still get your honor talents, and everyone can move through that progression. And our plan is just continue to add prestige levels with every season. We won't reset your prestige level or anything. You'll just have more honor you can earn and more cool rewards you can get. So this system's been great. We've gotten great response from our teammates, from all of you, a lot of people doing PvP who haven't done it before. It's given us tremendous tuning knobs to balance arenas at a high level like we want to, and not really damage the PvE ecosystem too much. So thanks for your time. I'm going to hand it over to Paul Cubitt, and he's going to talk to you all about Legion Professions.
I like to go back in time to January 2015. And that was when we started working on Professions for this new super secret expansion we were working on at the time called Legion. Now, we already knew at that point we wanted Professions to be more than just a bunch of recipes. We wanted a lot of extra stuff to do. And we were pretty sure that meant quests. But what kind of quests? Just regular old quests? Quests where you craft things? Frustratingly difficult quests where you chase a moose all the way across Stormheim? We didn't know yet. So we said, let's just pick 1 or 2 professions and we'll build prototype quest lines on top of those. And we'll just hammer on those until we see what feels good. And the 2 we chose were blacksmithing and mining. So for blacksmithing, we tried a bunch of things. It actually took us a little while, but the structure we ended up happy with was pretty simple, fairly linear. Started in Azuna, because remember this was 2 years ago before we even had the concept of scaling zones. Azuna was just the level 100 to 102 zone. Ended in Suramar, centered around the hub of your trainer in Dalaran, taught you a bunch of recipes along the way. And we thought that structure felt pretty good. So then we moved on to mining, and that we tried something a little different. It's more organic. You'll be out in the world mining, and maybe you find a cool rock and bring it back to your trainer, and they teach you how to mine that rock more efficiently. Or you'll be out mining and a creature shows up and they attack you, or they teach you something about mining right out there in the field. And we thought that felt pretty good too. So now we've got these 2 prototypes under our arm. Let's move forward and build the rest of the profession quest lines for our primary professions, the alchemy, herbalism, skinning, tailoring, so on. Now by this point, we've already, we've got a couple more systems coming online in Legion. It's getting to be a little bit later in 2015. And we realize we have a quest problem. So your quest log, it's already got your zone quest in it, that's normal. But now it's also got this Order Hall quest line, and this Artifact quest line, and the Illidan quest line, and 2 different profession quest lines. And they're all pulling you in different directions and commanding your attention. How overwhelming would it feel if you actually had to deal with 6 different profession quest lines? We determined that would be too much, So how are we going to give you that extra content, extra stuff to do for these secondary professions without overloading your quest log? Well, for fishing, fishing hardly has any quests at all. Your progression as a fisher is done by collecting rare fish, filling up achievements, and then eventually unlocking and upgrading the fishing pole artifact, the underlight angler. So, fun fact about the underlight angler, it started its life as a joke. Someone in an artifact meeting said something along the lines of, hey, I just figured something out. Fishing poles are weapons. Artifacts are weapons. We should make a fishing pole artifact. And and we heard it, and we went, oh, that's awesome. Like, we can never do that, of course. But, like, cool joke, though. And then someone else brought it up again, but more seriously, and we started talking about it and said, well, what would that even be? Is it an engineering thing? Is it demonic in origin? Is it from the Titans? And as we started talking about this in front of Owen and the other design leads and the art director and game director, we were all kind of surprised when nobody said, no, you can't do that, that's too silly. So we made it, and we were really glad we did. On the subject of fishing, we also wanted fishing this expansion to be more of a community experience, so we added Dalaran fishing raids. This was something that was intentional. We were hopeful that people would figure out that if you have more people fishing together in this one particular area, that it would be more lucrative for everyone involved. And yeah, you guys figured that out pretty much day one. We saw these fishing raid groups showing up in the group finder, so good job. In contrast, there was actually another type of fishing raid that showed up in Legion, and that was the garrison fishing raid. So what happened here, if you're not familiar, sounds like some of you are, at least one person is that due to an unforeseen interaction with the new looting rules in the new expansion and the old area of the garrison, you could get super rare fishing items, things which would normally take a couple dozen hours or more to earn in just 1 or 2 hours of fishing in a 40-man raid inside the garrison. Now this was not intentional, and when it happens, we were freaking out a little bit. We were running to each other's desks that morning saying, like, how can we stop this? Who knows what's going on? We need to protect the value of these rare items. Can we hotfix this? And the answer was, yeah, we could. So we put together a hotfix and we're ready to fix it. But before we pushed that button, we stopped and said, you know what? People are playing together in their garrison. They're forming raids to go fishing together. There's something really cool and like MMO-y about that. So yes, it is actually really important that we do protect the value of these rare items for the people who spend a lot of time earning them and are proud of that. But people are playing together and having fun, and that's really kind of the most important thing here. So we let it slide, at least until Broken Shore came out, garrison fishing raids remained. And we carried that philosophy forward too to other exploits that showed up later with mining and herbalism, which required you to play with other people in kind of a fun way. They said, we can hotfix this right away, but let's let people keep mining basilisks just for a little longer. So moving on to our next profession, cooking. Cooking, much like fishing, has... It's a confusing response. Okay. Cooking, much like fishing, has hardly any quests at all. So cooking, your progression is done through work orders, through your sous chef, Nomi. So a couple things. I'm not sure what you guys are even laughing at. What worked well about Nomi? Well, a couple things. I think most notably, he gave you a reason to check into Dalaran every couple days, which is something our game needed and continues to need. What could have been better about Nomi? Well, the system was a little opaque. I think it wasn't always obvious what you had to do to progress. And there was one other thing I was supposed to say about... Right, he's a horrible chef and he burns all your food. So, fun story about Nomi. While we were building him, we were putting together his treasure tables, which recipes go where. We knew pretty early, okay, it feels bad and broken if you don't earn any recipes, you just get that empty loot window. So we said, we know what to do, we'll just put in a gray item. We'll call it badly burned food. Kind of a joke, this recipe didn't work out, but you can sell it for gold. Well, we could have named this item anything. We could have called it kitchen scraps, failed recipe, tasty kitchen leavings. But because of the naming of the item, you get the impression that Nomi is this really bad chef, can't control the temperature of his ovens. And that really wasn't actually our goal. So again, we said, well, we know how to fix this. We can just change the name of this item. But by the time we were able to do so, Nomi had actually become really recognizable for being a bad chef. People were making jokes and memes about him, and it felt like it would be a betrayal of that, to just roll him back to being the boring chef he was intended to be. So yes, now Nomi is a bad chef, but that also means he just has a lot of room to grow. Okay. Let's move on to some of the new systems we added for professions in Legion, what we think worked well about them, and what could have been better. So first, gathering nodes. Mining and herbalism nodes are now shared. Up to 10 people can hit them. We think these felt really good. Thank you. They feel natural. You're not competing as much with other players. I know people at Blizzard who, after they're done with their normal raids, they go on herbalism raids together. That's just like beyond rad. What could have been better? Skinners did not get to participate in this new shared resource node system. And in fact, the experience of being a Skinner may have gotten just a little bit more painful in Legion because due to our new tapping rules, you can have a situation where someone who's not even in your party helps you kill a creature. That's good, but then they fail to loot the corpse, and that means you can't skin it. That's bad. So don't worry, Skinners, we got you. We have a fixed plan for that particular issue, as well as a way for you to have a more shared resource system in the future. So. In the meantime, everybody else, please be kind to your fellow Skinners and just loot your corpses. And this will all go away. Next, we have recipe ranks. So we added the ability to have 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star versions of certain recipes in Legion. And we thought these felt pretty good, too. Even after you've learned all your recipes, you could still progress within your profession. You could still have something to look forward to. What could have been better? Well, I'm not sure we actually got our tuning right. Ideally, a 1-star recipe is really easy to earn. Anybody can do it. 3 stars are pretty hard to get, and 2 stars land somewhere in between. Where we ended up was a lot of our 1-star recipes were gated behind a long quest line, maybe a little bit too long. And then a lot of our 2-star recipes were just on vendors in Dalaran, where they probably would have been better served out in the world in treasure chests and creatures, and dungeons, and so on. Lastly, the Obliterum Forge. This is a new system we added to allow you to upgrade the quality of the gear that you craft. And this did pretty much everything we expected too. We saw a lot of people unlocking the Forge, trading bracers in order to do so. A lot of people crafting Obliterum, buying and selling Obliterum, applying Obliterum to their gear. The word Obliterum is just really fun to say. What could have been better? The actual experience of obliterating an item probably isn't as rewarding as it could be, especially for small ticket items like level up gear, individual potions. That's not the most satisfying click in the game, and maybe something which could get better in the future. So the future. All across the World of Warcraft team, Ian talked about this a little bit yesterday. We have this really big, important goal of making sure this expansion stays vibrant with patches and content, stuff to do. That holds true for professions as well. We really want to make sure that crafting and gathering remain viable throughout the lifetime of this expansion. You've already seen in patch 7.1, we added new recipes, we added the Blood Trader, we increased the Obliterum cap up to item level 855, so you can get your crafted gear up to 855 now. In our upcoming patch 7.1.5, the Obliterum cap's going up again, now to 865, so the crafted gear continues to get better. There's more new recipes showing up. There's going to be a new quest line for blacksmiths to unlock some forgotten weapon transmogs. And we have more plans for patch 7.2, and the patch after that, and so on. So by the time this expansion is done, if you're a gatherer, it's possible you might not even be gathering from the same gathering nodes anymore. If you're a crafter, you can look forward to new gear, new consumables, maybe, just an idea we've thrown around, not a promise, but an idea, maybe even crafted legendaries. The future is really fun to think about, really exciting to think about, but unfortunately this is supposed to be a retrospective. So I'm going to give it back to Jeremy Feasel to close us off. He's going to talk about my favorite kind of quests in the world, world quests.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. So when we approached the World Quest system, there was one major question that we wanted to answer when we approached Legion's endgame. This is a really pretty concept art picture of Suramar at night, one of my favorite zones. And the big question that we wanted to answer was, what was our favorite daily system, and how do we improve on it? So we look back into the past, and especially at Mists of Pandaria. When you look at MOP's dailies from an aggregate standpoint, there was a lot of cool stuff to do there, and you were doing them for very recognizable people. Going out with the Shadowpan in the endgame, you knew who they were, you had already quested for them, and it felt like the continuation of an awesome story. So we took that as our initial prototype and set forth these design goals. First, It should tell a great story. We thought that MOP did a great job of this, not only at continuing the stories of people you'd already worked for, but at creating new stories for them that continued to tell their story of how they lived in this universe, things like the Golden Lotus and the Celestials. However, we wanted to make sure that it didn't feel like when you logged in, you had an overwhelming list of things to do at the beginning of the day, 20 or more daily quests, and every time you unlocked a new faction, adding more daily quests over to the top of that, to the point where you felt a little overwhelmed. Instead, we wanted it to feel like the world was an active participant, like things were changing all the time, and logging in at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day could significantly change what you had to do. We thought the variety of content in MOP was great. Things like the Roll Club, Lao Softfoot, killing elites, killing creatures, and regular quests had a great variety. However, we thought the variety of rewards could really use an improvement. Doing the same thing every day and getting the same reward for it felt a little repetitive. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that we made better use of the entire continent. The level designers make this huge, gorgeous world for us to live in. And in this world are people that you've already done quests for. You know why they're there. You've heard their stories. Why don't we continue to use all of this great content that we've already built in the endgame? So we started discussing some of the types of content that fit into the system best. For example, level up quests. But instead of just doing level up quests, we did variants of level ups, where sometimes we would take several quests, change up the objectives, so you would have a quest earlier where it was kill 10 things and kill a boss, and instead, in the world quest, it's kill 5 things, kill a boss, and collect some things. This let us vary things in the end game, vary to your leveling experience, so it still felt like new content. Secondly, we wanted to make better use of our rare spawns. Our rare spawns are fun things to fight when you're leveling up. Let's also make them fun things to fight in the end game by adding additional abilities to them and giving them additional levels of difficulty. We definitely wanted there to be max level areas so that as you're walking through the world of the Broken Isles, you can look off on that cliff and see a powerful level 110, 111, or 112, or even in the case of Stormheim, 113 dragon that's waiting for you to level up and take it on. And that helped it feel like you were leveling against some piece of content rather than the entire world leveling alongside you. We dipped our toes into this idea of PvE/VP with the Warden Towers, giving us the opportunity to get you flagged for PvP without necessarily direct repercussions. And a part of this is allowing players that may not necessarily PvP all the time to get into the PvP system, kind of what Brian was talking about, where it gives you an entry point where you can feel like it's a little bit safer. At the same time, we went completely the other direction and added 5 FFA arenas to the islands, the most that we've ever done in an expansion pack. And this was super exciting for us. Just because of the sheer amount of things you can do in an overworld FFA arena, we could never have done an arena, a hardcore arena, where you were riding on the backs of animals or you turned into a murloc. So this gave our designers a lot of freedom, which has ultimately caused them to come up with the idea of brawls. We also took a look at some of our systems that already fit cleanly into the daily system. Daily dungeons felt awesome. Why can't they be world quests? Daily pet battle quests, of course, felt awesome. So why can't they be world quests? And we started thinking, at this point, really outside of the box. What else could be a world quest? Can we get away from the idea of daily quests and really add a huge amount of additional content that maybe couldn't fit cleanly into the daily quest system before? Like our trade skill bonanzas, where you find a trade skill world quest that you and a bunch of friends can get together and gather a whole bunch of materials. And we thought this was awesome. However, whenever you're designing a system, there's always one overriding philosophy or one question that you have to ask yourself at the very beginning. So I'm going to put this back to you real quick. Let's pretend that you are the lead designer in charge of world quests. What is the very first design question that you have to ask yourself? Think about that for a second. Yell it out if you want to. The very first question that we had to answer, believe it or not, was how many icons is the right number of icons to be on the map? And you're probably thinking, that seems like something that you get to a lot later. But in fact, it speaks to a lot of different values. For example, the number of icons that you have on the map directly relates to the number of things you're doing per unit time. And there's a certain amount of things that you want to do in a zone that feels right. There's an amount of travel time between quests that just feels right. And we can change up any of the values on the other end of that spectrum. We can make the quests take longer. We can give them better rewards. But one thing that we can never change is the size of the world. So that was the first question we answered. And we decided that this felt like too many things to do in one space. This was our first playtest instructions, where we actually created content at those points. We gave all of the designers a map for what their daily adventure would be like, sort of a slice of content, a day in the life of world quests. There were some bonus objectives here, some treasures, a summonable boss and a rare spawn, a regular quest and a pet battle quest. And we sent this out to everybody to playtest. The feedback we got was very positive, that this felt like a great iteration on daily quests. Everything coalesced from there into a more modern system that you see today. This wouldn't be a design retrospective if we didn't also discuss other iterations to systems. For example, not only did we want to vary the content, we wanted to vary the rewards. We felt that things were a little too static in the past. So we came up with this new reward scheme, where doing a single world quest could reward you with a wide variety of different things to do. And what fell out of this was the idea that your daily adventure, even if we gave you the exact same world quest 2 days in a row, could change significantly. How you're going to approach those world quests on that second day is going to be completely different based on what the rewards are. This is just another layer of sort of randomization of the content that allows you to have a different adventure every day. But we ran into a problem, and that was that we made about 50 world quests across the world, and some days you didn't feel like doing 50 world quests. And in fact, some players felt like 50 world quests a day was maybe a little bit too much for them. They wanted to take a smaller bite. So we came up with the idea of bite-sized rewards. You can see my terrible MS Paint here. This is actually what we send to other designers to convince them of things. We took a system that we liked, Hearthstone's daily system, and sent this out and said, what if we did something very similar, with the end goal of getting you to different zones on different days? And it ends up that what this does is add even a third layer of flavor to create a delicious cake of content. You have your first bite, which is your emissary quest, which will send you to a different location at the beginning of every day. Got your second bite, which is the rewards that you get, and your third bite, which is your variety of content. The combination of these three things means that throughout the entire lifetime of the expansion pack, it will be very rarely that you will ever have the same adventure on any given day. And it's one of those great things that gives world quests longevity. Now, of course, this wouldn't be a retrospective if we didn't also talk about things that hit the cutting room floor, things that we didn't quite get to. Some of the exciting pieces of content that we really wanted to get to, but kind of ran out of time, were scenarios. We wanted to do more things like the Holm High Mountain adventure, where you could be taken to an entirely different space from the Broken Isles with a bunch of other people to do something fun and awesome. We wanted to do class-specific quests. We think this is a really cool idea. Whether or not that's paladins getting together to wreck things with other paladins, or paladins getting together to help out the Warlock Order Hall, we think that's pretty cool. We wanted to bring back Legion invasions in the Broken Isles. We wanted to create summonable bosses, similar to the Encourage elements way back in the day, where you would get an outfit together and then summon up a boss that everybody could fight. The idea that you could create a world quest in the world that everybody could participate in. Rare world quests, similar to Hulan back on Timeless Isle, where Hulan would spawn and everybody would yell to everybody in the zone, "It's only up for a small period of time, you better get over here." We like the idea of region-wide world quests, like Kazumath the Hungering, where one entire region, like North America, can unlock it for everyone else. And I'm very excited to also announce you'll be seeing all of these elements make a return in patch 7.2. Just the sheer fact that we can talk about that many iterations on world quests, and right now you're probably thinking of cool ideas for future world quests, tells us that this is an awesome system, and the future is bright for world quests in World of Warcraft. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. On behalf of my fellow designers and everybody on the World of Warcraft team, thank you for coming out today, and we'll see you on the Broken Isles.